Hi Maker, I'm Angel with FleeceFun.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make a fabulous witch's hat. It's so tall it can't even fit in the frame. It's amazing. It is a fabulous couture style witch's hat. It is so much better than your average dollar store witch's hat. I like this pattern. For this project you will need the following.
For this project you will need 1 1/4 yards of fabric for the exterior.
All right, now a word of advice on the fabric. After I made this one out of felt, and I made this one out of a more stretchy velour. Yes, it's velvet-like in texture. I know I'm growing. You want a fabric that has a little more stretch to it. Actually, honestly, this probably would have been better if it would be made out of fleece. I know, fleecefun.com, why didn't I do that? So, a word of advice, you can absolutely use felt. It's just a little more finicky to work with than with something with a little more stretch. It will just look a little bit better and smoother if it has some stretch to it. But you do what you want. You've been warned, just my advice.
1 1/4 yards of one-sided fusible ultra stabilizer, 2 yards of wide double fold bias tape in the color of your choice, 2 yards of 10 gauge jewelry wire, 1 non-insulated butt connector for 10 gauge wire, wire crimper or cutter, items to decorate your hat. Wreath picks are a great way, iron, press cloth, Sharpie pen, sewing essentials, sewing machine, pins, needles, that sort of thing. And of course, Fleece Fun's free PDF pattern. I have a link to that at the end of the video or in the comments below.
All right, let's get started by cutting out all the items you need for this fabulous hat.
How to make a witch hat instructions. Step 1, cut out the elements to the witch hat.
Now, I have a child size and an adult size, and I have actually 2 different cone types. I have one cone that's a little shorter, and it's just meant to be like the straight up regular kind of witch's cone. And then I have one that is taller, and it's so tall you'd probably bang the top of it in the doorway. So you're gonna want to pull it over, and it's designed to be kind of pulled over and mooshed over. And that's the reason for the 2 different cone sizes. I also have 2 sizes. I have an adult size and I have a child size. Now, if you put on the brim and you really like, oh wait, it's too big, you need to put the cone on your head, because the cone actually determines the size of the hat more than the brim, if that makes sense, because the cone curves in. That's why I didn't make a variety of sizes, because the cone actually gives me some wiggle room when it comes to adult and kids sizes. So my advice to you is, if you want to double check it, just assemble the cone pattern, try it on your head, and the brim might fall a little bit lower or higher on your head than it does on mine, but it should still fit, okay? The child size, it really will work for, I would say, anyone 10 to probably about 5 to 10. Although I did try it on my toddler, and he has a pretty big noggin, and it worked on his head too, but it was huge on him. So my advice to you is, if you're not quite sure if it's going to fit or you're worried about the sizing, assemble the pattern and try the cone on your head or your child's head first.
Cut out one of the desired cone from the exterior fabric.
Now, a couple of things you need to be aware of when you're cutting out this hat. This is not your average just round brim, plop a cone on top of it hat. I actually did some research on hats, I know. And this is more couture styling in the fact that the brim is actually designed to fit better and be more complementary to your face. So for example, the back is actually a lot shorter than the front, and this is on purpose, because I don't know if you've ever worn a hat and you like bang the brim and then your hat flops and it doesn't look good. This will prevent that from happening. The sides are a little bit wider and it's just a little bit shorter in front, and it's supposed to frame the face nicely and look good. I want you to look good. But because this shape is a little different, you need to pay attention as to where the back is and where the front is when you're putting things together, okay? Back is a little bit shorter, front is a little bit bigger, and the sides are wider. So pay attention to that when we're cutting things out.
On doubled fabric, cut out 2 of the brim. Be sure to cut out the center and make sure you're cutting to the exterior line. Tip: to cut out the center, either snip the middle of the scissors to get the cut going, or use a rotary blade to make it easier.
Now I opted to use a very stiff interfacing, and I like how it shapes, and it holds its shape beautifully. It does make the hat a little heavier. Can you use a lighter interfacing? You can. It won't look as nice and structured as this hat does though. But again, it'll still work because the wire in it will help keep the brim out. but I'm just gonna tell you, I've worn this hat and it's not terrible. After a few hours, it might get to be a little bit heavy for you. Just use lighter interfacing, see what works for you.
Now it's time to cut out the stiff interfacing. This interfacing is key to help the hat keep its shape. Cut down the pattern so it's the correct size for the interfacing. That's the exterior of the cone and the interior circle of the hat. The interfacing is more difficult to work with, and pinning the pattern is impossible. I recommend placing the pattern on it and tracing it with a Sharpie. Then cut out the pattern. Cut one of the cut down cone. Cut one of the cut down brim. Note, for the brim, the interfacing is the same on the outside, it's just the interior that is a little different.
Now that we have it all cut out, it's time to start adding interfacing to pieces.
Step 2, add the interfacing to the top of the hat and brim. Let's start with the cone. Center the shape on the interfacing on the wrong side of the exterior fabric. Since I'm using black felt, this really doesn't matter, but with most fabrics, make sure that it's the wrong side. Using a pressing cloth and the correct settings on your iron, refer to the instructions that come with the interfacing and make sure the glue is facing down so you don't adhere the glue to the pressing cloth, not that I've ever done that, and iron on the interfacing into place. It should be nicely adhered and have space on the sides and bottom when you're finished. Repeat the step with the brim and on the exterior pieces. Adhere to the wrong side of the fabric. There should be a space in the center where the exterior fabric can be seen.
All right, now that interfacing is ironed on, it's time to move on to the next step.
Step 3, make the brim sandwich.
Now that we have our brim sandwich, we basically have fabric, interfacing, fabric. We're going to sew along the edge, and we're basically going to use the bias tape to finish that edge nicely and to make a casing for the wire.
Place the exterior piece of the brim on top of the interfacing so the right side is facing out. It now should be fabric, interfacing, fabric. The right side of the fabric should be facing out on the bottom and top. Locate the back of the brim. This is where the brim width is the smallest. This is where the bias tape should begin and end. Sew the double fold bias tape around the brim, starting and ending at the back. Be sure to leave a 3-inch section of bias tape unfinished in the back for space to insert the wire later.
Now, I'm going to encourage you, always do the wire later on. Some people might be like, oh, we'll just do the brim all at once, so get the wire in. Trust me, you want to wait after you sew the cone on because it makes the brim more floppy and easy to work with. And sewing the cone onto the brim, it takes a little finesse and time.
Step 4, make the cone to the witch hat. Now it's time to make the cone to the hat. Fold the cone over so right sides are touching. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew the cone together.
When you're sewing the cone, I purposely sewed using a zigzag stitch so it would catch the interfacing a little bit just to make it a little more sturdy, especially along that seam to help it stand up.
Turn the cone right side out. Take your time, it will be a little stiff and difficult, but it will turn. Be careful when pushing the top point not to poke it all the way through.
All right, looks good. Now let's bring the brim and the cone together.
Step 5, bring the top and brim together. Locate the back of the brim, that's where it's the most narrow, and line up the back of the seam of the cone with the back of the brim. Place the cone inside the center of the brim. Slowly begin to pin the cone and brim together. For this part, you will want to pin it very well. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew the brim to the top of the cone. Try to keep a 1/2 inch seam allowance if you can. It's okay if it's not perfect. Lengthen the stitch a little and go slow. If you need to adjust, make sure the needle is lowered in the fabric and adjust. Take your time, it's not a race.
Now that we have that cone sewn on, it's time to add the wire to the brim.
Step 6, add wire to the brim. Depending on the fabric you chose, the brim might be very floppy. Now it's time to fix that. Cut your wire so it's the correct length. Find your open gap in the bias tape and begin to thread the wire around the brim.
Be careful as you're pushing the wire through. You don't want to push the wire so hard that it'll push through that bias tape and poke out. Just take your time and thread it through.
Continue to thread until it's all the way through. Hook the ends of wire around each other and make sure that the wire is evenly distributed around the brim and the brim can lay reasonably flat on the work surface. Place the butt connector on one end. Crimp it into place. Trim down the wire so it fits properly into the butt connector. Place it on the other side and crimp it into place, making a seamless loop.
Now let's close up that opening we had in the bias tape.
Sew shut the opening in the bias tape.
Now that that's all finished, your hat is finished, but here comes the really fun part. Time to add all the fun decorations to it. Some ideas for decorations is you can do flowers or felt things. Also, honestly, Halloween wreath picks are a great way to decorate a witch hat.
Step 7, decorate your witch hat. If you made the taller one, it's time to scrunch it down. There are a couple different ways to do this. With a needle and thread, thread through the top of the cone and sew it down, or fold it over and glue it down with a hot glue gun. Now, decorate it any way you want. I chose some items and hot glued them into place.
And that's it. You have a fabulous witch's hat. What you just need to do is you can, because of the way it's designed, you can like kind of mess with this and bend it how you want it to look and give it that kind of look and swagger that you want.
Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one.
If you liked this tutorial, I have several more on my blog, fleecefun.com. I have a ton of costume patterns. A lot of the stuff that you see behind me is also up there. I'm adding videos all the time, so be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you know when I post something, and I would also appreciate a thumbs up. That's, that would be a treat for me. I would love a thumbs up for my video here. And let me know in the comments below, are you more spooky Halloween or fun Halloween type of person?